the Lekker Rugby Pod Special Edition.
Welcome to Megaphone Rugby. We're going to talk to not a journalist this week. We're going to be talking to Wihan van Riet, our friend from the Rocketfoot Academy, the guy who understands kicking like we understand breathing. And I thought it appropriate to talk to him about Manie Libbok's new coaching technique. So before we get started with that, welcome Wihan. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure to be here.
We saw Andre Pretorius mention to me that Manie has got a bit of a different approach now. We all know that his plate kicking was a bit of a weak spot in his armor. Otherwise, he's an exceptionally good fly-off, and if he could fix that, he could become the complete package. So, if without any further ado, what did you notice before we look at a video? What did you notice about Manie? What's he doing different now compared to what he did before in terms of plate kicking?
Yeah, it's always difficult to get really good quality film of our kickers here in South Africa. So it's hard to give you a complete detailed breakdown. But from what I can see, there's a change in just the angle of approach is slightly narrower from what I can tell. He's also shortened his approach a little bit, which I guess will minimize some of the variables that are present. Makes it a little easier to, I guess, get into the what they would think is the correct position at contact. Lots of I suppose compensatory movements. That's going to help him execute his very complicated technique.
Well, we'll talk about the variables because that's always interesting. And the word compensatory techniques, that makes a couple of red lights go on for me. So let's have a look at that video first.
All right, so this is one of the kicks that Manie missed to the left. It is from the touchline. It is from the right-hand side, which is notoriously a little more, I guess, mentally difficult for kickers, for specifically for right-footed kickers. What I want to talk about is understanding the relationship the kicker needs to have with the ball in order to kick the ball without having to create any overcorrections in the swing. And that starts with the approach line. It's not necessarily the angle of approach, although that does make a difference, whether you're very narrow or very wide. I mean, that surely makes a difference. I'm referring more to the relationship the kicker has with the ball. So with regards to his approach line, where is that in relationship to the ball? When we watch Manie kick here, and as he's moving down his approach line is directly at the ball. And for me, and the way that I teach this, and a lot of kids start off kicking this way. So one of the first things I do is I teach young kickers that there's a geometric relationship between the approach path and the ball. And it's a simple thing to understand is when you take your 3 or 4 steps back from the ball, you're creating linear distance between you and the ball. Now that's perfectly fine. You can close that distance in a straight line if you stood right behind the ball and toe punted it. That's easy to understand. But the complexity occurs when you take your lateral steps to the left if you're a right-footed kicker. With each step that you're taking to the left, you're creating more and more lateral distance between you and the ball. So where you start off your approach, let's say 2 or 3 steps in terms of a lateral distance away from the ball, and where you plant to kick the ball, you're half a step away from the ball. So logically, you can conclude that the lateral distance between the kicker and the ball progressively changes or is minimized as he moves throughout his approach. So he's effectively changing the distance between him and the ball in both of these dimensions, in this linear dimension and this lateral dimension. And therefore, he is moving into a space where he's meeting the ball. And so the kicker can't approach the ball because of this relationship, this lateral relationship. If he's approaching directly at the ball or even too narrow, at some point he has to get out of the way to kick the ball because he's going to end up in a space where he can't maintain that line and still kick the ball. He has to almost dynamically create space the closer he gets to the ball. And you can clearly tell that that's happening if I just let this video run. So his line is straight at the ball. And then from this position here, he starts to move to the left to get out of his own way to end up in a space where he kicks, where he's able to kick the ball. And this is what causes all of these variables, because there's so many dynamic things that's happening. He's moving in one line, then he's changing direction, and that change of direction and the change of direction of momentum is influencing how he's able to swing. He can try to swing straight and have more quad dominant swing and try to finish towards the target, but just because of this change of direction, the swing comes along with the body, so everything is going to turn and rotate and move towards the left. And so when I talk about compensatory movements, this is the primary action. The primary action that initiates the swing is Mani moving out of his original line, so essentially breaking alignment, moving to the left. The swing comes along. Naturally, the swing wants to swing to the left and rotate to the left. And so in order to make that swing or interrupt the actual natural flow and direction of the swing, he needs to create a compensatory movement on the opposite side of the body. And you'll see that in his left arm if I continue to play the movement, but a very aggressive counter rotation on the left-hand side of the body in order to stop or disrupt the natural flow and natural direction of the swing in the attempt to make the swing go towards where the goalposts are. And you'll kind of see that right here. You'll see he's got a very, very aggressive left arm. His entire body is contorted into a very, how could I put it, a very sort of inefficient, uncomfortable shape. Like his whole body's bent, and sort of crooked. And this is all because of that compensatory movement on the left-hand side of the body to kind of fight against the force of the kicking leg moving to the left. And, I would refer to this as a corkscrew. It's like one half of the body is moving in one direction, the other half of the body is moving in another direction. And, the meeting of those two forces is supposedly, going to make the ball go straight. To me, that's just quite an inefficient way to do this.
All right, yeah, before we move on to the proform side of things, where you analyze Mani's kicking compared to the way you teach things, what is different to the way Mani's kicking right now compared to the way that he kicked before? Is it a shorter run-up? Is it, Andre mentioned something about the left foot being a roll foot or something like that? I'm not sure what it means. What is different in the way that Mani kicks at the moment compared to the way that he kicked before?
Yeah, I think that, he's definitely made an adjustment to his approach angle. It seems as though that he's not as wide as he used to be, which makes that rotation towards the target, if you're in that paradigm and you are turning and rotating to steer the ball, makes that rotation a little bit less aggressive. It seems like he's also a little closer to the ball, which I guess is also, minimizing some of the variables between his starting position and when he's kicking the ball. So those are the changes that I'm seeing. I still, when I watch him kick, it feels to me like it's the same action, and that action is caused by his relationship with the ball and the fact that he needs to get out of the way in order to kick it. And it's rooted in this sort of ideology that the goalposts are the target and the kicker needs to actively try to athletically steer the ball in that direction, which sounds like a logical thing to do. But once you understand the basic physics and geometry involved, it'll make total sense that's not really required, and it makes kicking a lot simpler.
Well, you mentioned this now, that the goalposts are not the target. The target is the ball. Now, that sounds quite simple to say, but I have absolutely no idea what it means. Explain it to me.
Yeah, I know it's a controversial thing to say. It is a little bit of a catchphrase, but it is the central core idea of the philosophy that we teach. The entire premise of the way guys like Mani kick, and lots of guys across the industry, and look, it's not to say that you can't get good at it. If you're a very gifted athlete, and guys like Mani are, and you can get good at this athletic movement. But the entire premise of proform kicking is predicated on the idea that the kicker doesn't need to do anything to steer or guide the ball actively themselves in order to. If you think about what Mani's doing, is approaching directly at the ball. At the last second, he's getting out the way. That motion of getting out the way is causing a rotation, and he's trying to control that rotation in such a way that when he strikes the ball, the energy is transferred, at the slightest moment in a straight line towards where the target is. And whereas from our school of thought, it's completely different. We tell kickers that the ball is the target so that it takes their attention away from where the goalposts are. And the problem with where the goalposts are, if we just use a right-footed kicker, once you line up, the goalposts are always to your peripheral left. So it tells your brain, or your brain senses it needs to do something to make that ball go to the left of you, which is where the goalposts are. But if you understand the basic biomechanics and physics involved in the kicking movement, then you start to realize that there's no need for you to create that rotation manually or voluntarily, and also not preemptively. The body will rotate by itself because you're landing on a plant foot that's decelerating the left-hand side of the body as the right foot accelerates, and that those two opposing forces causes a rotation. And so it is really in the way in which you set up the angle which you calibrate and the relationship that you calibrate with the ball. If you do that correctly, you don't need to turn. All you need to do is view the ball as a target and swing at the ball, and the rotation will happen by itself. And if you've calibrated these things in your setup correctly, that rotation when you strike the ball will happen at exactly the right time. And that's kind of what we teach. So it's these two schools of thought. The school of thought one is goalposts are the target, and you need to turn, rotate preemptively, voluntarily, all of those things to try to guide and steer the ball in the direction that it needs to go. And then the ball is the target. That rotation happens by itself. You need to take care of this geometric relationship that you're creating with the ball, set up correctly, and then execute your form and focus on this process here, and forget about where the target is or forget about where the goalposts are, and everything happens the way that it should because of your natural biomechanics. Your body will just naturally rotate the same way a golf swing does, the same way if you swing a tennis racket, you're not thinking about turning your body. It just happens because of, an anchored foot and, just leverage and so forth. So it's really just taking advantage of the body's natural biomechanics and allowing it to work the way that it should. And understanding that allows you then to set up and calibrate a relationship with the ball where that natural rotation will happen exactly the way that it should. The whole thing is like, if you're kicking the ball from the touchline or from 50 meters or from right in front, nothing should change. Every kick is a straight line. Your technique should stay exactly the same every single time. You should hit the ball with the same the same mechanics every single time. Nothing should change. Just because you're on the right-hand touchline, to your brain, it seems like the target is even more to your left because of it's more of an optical illusion. But because of that, most kickers think they have to do other things to get them because it looks like it needs to curve or turn or whatever. But that's all, it's all wrong. Like every kick is exactly the same. If you kick the ball in a straight line, it's going to go over whether or not you're on the right-hand touchline, left-hand touchline, at 60 meters, at 20 meters in front. It should be the same mechanics every time. So if it's the case where he's changing his angle based on where he's on the field, that it's very wrong. You can never create neurological certainty if you're kicking the ball differently every single time based upon where you are on the field or how far it is or how close it is or whatever. One of the most important things about developing a technique is developing neurological certainty. So you can close your eyes and the form just happens. It just takes over. And you can only do that if you repeat the same mechanics over and over again.
Neurological certainty, you mean, was it muscle memory?
Yeah, muscle memory. Just your body remembers how to do this. And if you keep giving your body different stimulations, so to speak, different sensations. If you're this far away from the ball, then you're that close, or you're at this angle and that angle. It's going to make it very difficult for you. Now you've got to memorize, 15 different swings. That's not what you want to do.
No, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. It's like a golf swing, Does it affect your kicking, for example, when you get tired? I know when days I used to play golf, I start off well because I'm all fit and fresh, and by the time I get tired, things change a little bit because you start making mistakes. Is that true for a rugby player as well, a kicker?
Of course, fatigue has an effect, and it's part of the way that we set up our training programs. You never want to train under fatigue. A lot of guys think that more is better. But that's just not the case. And it's not the case with weightlifting, and it's not the case with kicking either. It's when your body's fresh and your muscles are working the way that they're supposed to, and they're firing the way that they're supposed to, and your brain is fresh, that's quality work. And then you get to a point in your session where you are fatigued and you're not firing the way that you should. And now again, your brain's getting different sets of data, and it needs to sort through all of that. And it kind of, at some point figures that you've got 2 different ways of kicking or 3 different ways of kicking based upon how you move when you're fresh and how you move when you're fatigued. So it is a real thing. Kicking at 80 minutes is different than kicking at the first minute of the game, I suppose, because you are tired and so forth. But I think that's why you have to, if you're in a situation where it's 80 minutes and you've got a kick to make, you want to take as much time as possible to just get your breath, slow your heart rate, and just feel like you would feel if it was the first or second kick of a training session. But yeah, there's nothing that you can do about that. The objective is to have to execute the same mechanics every single time, just like a golf swing, and whether you're fatigued or not. And that's what going to separate the best from not the best.
Right. You're teaching the proform method of kicking. You picked it up at the NFL with Mike Hollis, which looks sort of counterintuitive. The way the body works in proform looks a little weird, a little different. You're very upright and everything else. So now we're going to talk about, if you were now Mani's kicking coach, teaching in proform, how you would fix his kicking in a more permanent fashion.
Yeah, and of course it'll take a little bit of time. And like you're right, proform is a little bit of a sort of, just in contrast to what has been taught for such a long time, especially in the rugby industry. I think American football guys understand this a little bit better. And again, I just want to put out that disclaimer. This is not an American football style technique. It's a kicking movement. It is moving your body in a way that kicks a ball. Whether it's a football or a rugby ball, it makes no difference. Like I said earlier, if you kick the ball straight, you'll make your kicks. Now, so I just want to put that out there. I've heard that a lot before, that, oh yeah, but this is American football, it won't work in rugby. You're mistaken. This kicks the ball straight, very straight and very far. And if you do that in rugby, then you'll be successful. So yeah, I would begin by, if I had the opportunity to work with him, I would begin by establishing a set of just core concepts that he needs to understand. The first of which is separation. You cannot achieve, and I'll explain what that is now, but you can't achieve anything in the proform method if you don't click the concept of separation first. And that's something that I spoke about earlier. You cannot approach the ball directly and swing without having to overcorrect. That line towards the ball, too tight or on the ball, puts you in a position where you can never swing without having to overcorrect. And, so let me, if I can share my screen, I'll show you an example so that it just makes visual sense. All right. So this is a good visual to understand what I'm talking about when I talk about separation. So if you look at my approach line here, I've got a plant foot position that I'm lined up to. I've got a center line. And this is my alignment. The way I find this exact angle is quite interesting, but I'm not going to discuss that today. It's kind of a trade secret. But anyway, so I've got a plant foot line that's lined up to my plant foot location. Then I've got a center line, which part of my objective is to maintain this center line at all costs. And then, of course, just naturally parallel to all of that, I've got a kicking foot line. And if you look at these 3 lines, specifically more the kicking foot, you'll notice that it's not connected to the ball. And when I'm running through my approach, you'll notice that my kicking foot is never connected to the ball until I land on the plant foot. And that is essentially what allows me to move through the approach and then initiate a swing and never have to overcorrect, because I'm meeting the ball at the plant foot. I'm not looking for it before I get to the ball and then overshooting the ball and then having to overcorrect. So I'll let this play and I'll pause at different stages. So plant foot directly and straight towards my plant foot location. Very simple to understand. Again, just keep in mind, look at my center line. It never changes. My alignment never breaks, because that alignment I set up from the start of the approach is already perfect. Kicking foot lands in this position here, which is inside of the ball. It's still inside of the ball. It's not on the ball. It's inside of the ball. And you can watch my knee here. This is quite an interesting one. If you watch my knee and you look at the knee's alignment, you can see it when I make contact with the ball. The knee is in that position, and the foot has moved out of that line onto the ball naturally. So I call this the slot. So once that foot's in the slot, everything is aligned and everything will maintain. You will maintain alignment, and you'd need no overcorrections. From here, I move into my plant foot location. My center line is maintained, and if I can pause it. I think there's a slower video coming up. All right, so if you look closely here, kicking foot is in the slot there, meaning that it's inside of the ball or just in its original line. So I've never broken alignment. My center line is still maintained. I might have slightly gravitated a little bit towards that center line with that kicking foot. And from here, I'm never turning, I'm never rotating towards where the goalpost would be. My objective is to run straight. I enter this step straight and I exit this step straight. A lot of kickers from this position here, they start to think where the target is or where the goalposts are, and they start to turn towards the goalpost and they break this alignment. You have to remember that the ball is in this position. You are keeping the ball in that position relative to you based on where you're facing. So once you've created that alignment and committed to it, if you turn, you're relocating the ball, making it more and more difficult to kick it, making it more of an athletic feat to find the ball. However, if I maintain my alignment, I don't break that alignment, the ball stays exactly where it should be. And all I need to do is swing forward. From here, I'm forward, maintaining my center line. And as I spoke about earlier, if my kicking foot is in the slot and the knee stays down that line, once I make contact with the ball, I just want to get one frame back, you'll see that knee is still in that line and my kicking foot is on the ball. And that happens because of the angle that I'm approaching at. If I'm swinging forward down that line, then my foot moves out of the line and makes contact with the ball. So, but again, what you'll notice here is there's no overcorrection whatsoever. Everything just flows in one unified motion. I never have to turn, I never have to overcorrect or overcompensate or anything like that. Another thing you'll notice is if you watch my left arm, there's very little aggression as opposed to if you watch what Mani is doing. Mani's very aggressive with that left arm and it contorts his whole body. But because I'm not breaking alignment and I'm not having to change direction and rotate, I can move forward and straight through the ball, and everything stays nice and aligned, and I get a full range of motion in my swing through the ball. So so watching this from a front view is a little different than watching it from a back view. People would ask, but how do you know where this ball went? Well, I do kick out on the field, so I know where the ball goes. That sort of is kind of just captures a little bit of the ideas of proform kicking, and you can kind of tell, it's all about it's understanding alignment and not breaking that alignment once you've committed to it. Makes the kick so much easier because all you have to do is swing forward. You don't have to do anything else once your alignment is calibrated. So I think the first place I'll start with Mani is just having him understand that if he understands exactly where to run, that starts opening up the possibilities of what you can achieve with your swing. Your swing is all relative. You can't swing forward if you're on top of the ball because your body has to move out the way, and that has an effect on what your swing can do. It cannot move forward because you're not moving forward. You're moving left. So if he understands the first step is just understanding alignment and the separation, we call it separation between you and the ball, that opens up the possibility to swing in certain ways. The next thing I'd move on to is having him understand the idea, this thing that I talked about earlier, the ball is the target. And that is just, it's just a catchphrase that we use, or mental note that we use to have the kicker understand that no time during the approach does he ever have to turn towards the goalpost. Once he does that, he breaks alignment. And once he breaks alignment, we're back in the same boat. We have to fetch the ball. We're turning away from it. The ball's outside to our right. We have to fetch it. You can't kick it with your full potential because it's not where it's supposed to be, where you can access it with the front of your body and your quad. It is now outside of you. You have to open up, and once you open up, you have to close, and so that causes all of those things. And then I'll talk to him about running mechanics and the importance of how you're moving yourself to the ball. It's not just, I mean, for us, it's not as simple as just there's the ball, we run towards it. There's a very specific set of movements that you're making in order to get into the optimal body position at the ball. You can't get there, at least naturally, and have to just kind of flow into that position seamlessly without running in a very specific way. And those specific running mechanics is, to make it simpler to understand, instead of pushing ourselves to the ball, we're pulling ourselves to the ball, because that keeps the body upright and tall, and that allows you to just swing effortlessly into the ball, because once you're bent over and your hips are looking down, to get the swing out of there, it's a much more aggressive movement. It's not something that just happens. You got to really force it out of there. And so if I can go back for a second to Manie's video, just for people to understand that. So if you look at this angle here, this is the angle that I want to get rid of this angle. I would want him to be more and more upright, because what you'll see as he gets closer to the ball is he actually wants to be tall when he kicks the ball. But it makes it more difficult to be tall and vertical when you kick the ball if you're forward with your body position during the approach. So there's way forward, and now he's pulling back on his weight to get his weight back behind the ball. But it just, your body position inherits some of what you had to do in the steps prior to getting into this position. And so now he's forward and sort of crouched, and the plant leg is too narrow, and it's not a very optimal efficient position. I have a picture here in contrast. This is what I want when I kick the ball. I want my center line maintained. I want my center of mass behind the ball. I want to be perfectly balanced. And I can only be perfectly balanced if I don't change direction. If I run on that center line and I turn, things will happen and I won't be balanced. My plant foot would tend to come in as my torso goes away from the ball. I don't want to preemptively rotate. That's another note that I made there, which kind of links to being perfectly balanced. I want a quad dominant forward swing, but I can't have that if my alignment isn't established and committed to. I want my body in a uniform position, so a straight line from plant foot all the way through my torso, so everything is strong and not compromised. This note here, naturally flexed ankle, is just a natural foot position when you swing forward and you've maintained that alignment. My plant leg is fully extended. I'm not crouched on that, or that plant leg's not bent. The reason I don't want it bent is because this leg is swinging fully extended. If this leg is bent, then the earth is in the way of this foot, and I would have to compensate to get that foot to the ball without hitting the ground. I want to make contact on the inside panel of the ball, the panel facing me. That's just a result of not changing direction before I've kicked the ball. And then I've just made a note here that my original alignment is preserved, meaning that where I start the approach and where I make contact with the ball, that alignment and orientation is preserved throughout the entire approach, from the beginning to the end, until I've struck the ball. And then the rotation will take place. It happens right as you make contact with the ball. And that happens because this leg slows down and this leg accelerates, and that causes a natural rotation.
Something before we finish that I noticed about your way of kicking is how upright you are. You talked about it a little bit now, and also when you kick, your leg ends up almost above your head, whereas typically a kicker would sort of swing across his body. Is that more or less what you're referring to, that straight line thing? Because the way your kicks end is completely different to the way what we're used to seeing on a rugby field.
Yeah, I mean, we always say that the follow-through is really just a result of everything else that has happened. So your orientation, your alignment, the separation that you create, allowing you to swing forward, the running mechanics that you're running with, pulling yourself, staying upright. That follow-through is really a result of your body being in this perfect position that, I always say, like, when your body's in that position, it wants to kick the ball. It really wants to kick the ball in that position. And you can compare this to if guys are kicking out of hand, let's say they're kicking long torpedoes across the field, and I know you spoke to Franz Stein this morning as well. So if you go look at old videos of him kicking the ball out of hand, he's upright, he's tall, his weight's behind the ball. That's how he's getting the ball so far downfield. And this is no different. People think that the mechanics need to be different because when you're kicking a ball out of hand as opposed to a ball off the ground or off a tee, there's an angle difference, and the goalposts are to the left, and therefore you're required to turn and steer the ball there. And that's what's that's within that mindset is where they sacrifice these sorts of mechanics. If you understand and click the idea that there's really no difference between the kicking the ball out of hand and kicking the ball off the ground or off a tee, in terms of mechanics, it can work exactly the same way. So yeah, what you see in terms of the follow through is really just a cascade of movements that come together that results in that. And for me, when I watch that, if I watch kids kick and I see the follow through, you can immediately tell that the sequence of events that has led to them being in this position where they crouched over, the legs across the body, this part of the body is going that way. It's just not optimal. It's not efficient, but it's not there. You can't fix it there. You have to fix it in the sequence of movements that led them to that position in the first place. So yes, I am more upright, and yes, my follow through does get practically above my head, but it's because of the movements that are so efficient that led to it. It's not something that I'm trying to do it's just the result of it. It's not that I'm gifted or super athletic or anything like that. It's just the result of it. Yeah.
I was just wondering, because it looks so unusual almost, something to get used to. On that subject, how difficult is it to teach someone like Manie, who's been kicking for ages, has been taught to kick a certain way for many, many years? How difficult is it to get someone to convert to this kind of kicking?
Well, I think it's challenging depending on who you are and how quickly you learn, and it's of course how athletic you are and how stubborn you are. Not you, but your brain, like how stubborn those pathways are. But I think once you have somebody and you put them in the position that they are required to be in order to achieve these things, it's so easy. It's actually laughably easy to do it this way. It's really just an understanding. There are certain things that will take some time to kind of get over, I suppose, which is the voice in the back of your head saying like the goalposts are to the left, I have to turn. That's something that takes quite a bit of time to sort of unlearn, I suppose. But if you do enough drill work and stuff like that, and really it's just about understanding where to be in relationship to the ball in order to achieve these things. If you teach him that, if you give him this blueprint, I can't see why it wouldn't take him a season to get really proficient at kicking this way.
Thanks, Wihan. That was interesting, as always. Appreciate you making the time for us. I love these kind of technical discussions. I mean, it's stuff that I never even knew about. Watch out for that video we did with Tank Lanning about the scrums, for example. You never knew scrums could be so complicated. I love this kind of chat, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. And again, it's always difficult to come on here and tell people that their techniques are wrong. And I don't mean any offense by that. Of course, everybody's got their own opinions, and this is just a philosophy I'm extremely passionate about. I just know that it's the truth, as true as a kicking technique can be. So I'm looking forward to talking some more about it in the future. And I really hope that, whatever Manie's doing now, I truly hope that it really works. We need a Manie that can kick. Of course we need that. The Springbok backline is so good with him at the general position. So yeah, we're looking forward to that.
By the way, you can see the t-shirt that Wihan is wearing at Rocketfoot Academy. If you want lessons or want him to start coaching you, you're welcome to contact him. He does virtual coaching specifically. He's very good at that. As you could probably see from what we've been doing this morning, and get in touch with him and make a plan. It's worth your while. I'll put the details down in the description. Wihan is the kicking guru. I always go back to him and Andre Pretorius when I want to ask a question about kicking. Thanks, Wihan.
The Lekker Rugby Pod Special Edition.